Today we have a really important release from OpenAI. It's GPT 5.5, their latest model. The reason why it's particularly important is that OpenAI have trained a new pre-trained model. It's they codenamed it Spud, and it's really interesting to see how much difference there would be between the GPT 5.4 and GPT 5.5. And they've published this blog post and they've got a bunch of benchmarks here, and the differences do seem to be quite significant. So we have coding benchmarks, GDP eval seems to be like a bit of an increase. So overall, the scores are up. I guess that's what you'd expect. But here at Arena, we're all about real-world use. So I want to show you some of my early experiences with GPT 5.5. It was a little bit different this time in terms of how I've tested it, just because it was available on Codex, but not yet available via API. You can see they even say that here. So what I have done is I've done a number of tests in Codex directly, which is not directly comparable to some of the earlier tests that we do, but nevertheless, I want to share some of my early thinking. So one thing that I want to do is to give you this kind of nice visual test, which I quite like to do. Now, this is actually 5.4 to give you a feel for what it is that we're trying to get. That's our baseline that we're comparing to. And this is like a view of London. We've got different elements here, Big Ben, the Shard, things like that. We've got different seasons as well. So that's the idea here. That's what we're trying to get to. So how different is 5.5 versus 5.4? So what are your first impressions? What I see here is that I think the quality is quite a bit higher. So if we're going to get to the same setting. So for example, in here, we didn't get any river. I would say it's kind of very flat and not very ambitious. There are many different elements missing versus this one. We've got like extra houses here. We've got the river. We've got like quite nice trains. I think some of the landmarks are better. There are definitely some errors here. You can see the bridge is kind of on the side here. Yeah, elements not quite lined up, the trains going around. But I do think it is quite a notable improvement. So as these kind of one-shot generations, it did quite well. They also say it's more token efficient. It's hard to notice this directly, but at least it didn't take far longer to do that. So that's at least a good first impression here. So here you can drive the train, which is quite cool. And the whole prompt is quite complicated. Like, this is a hard task. Another thing I want to mention is that it's been really impressive, really big step change when I was running it on long running tasks. So in here, for example, I've got a screenshot where it was running for over 8 hours. And this is not a one-off example. Before, when I was doing these kind of runs, it was really annoying. Anytime I wanted the model to do the job completely, run for a long time, not just for the sake of it, but to actually complete the task. It was really hard to get the model to commit, and quite often it would maybe start and stop, and without actually completing a task. And here I wouldn't say it was always doing it, but it's certainly several times now I had generations which would literally take multiple hours. And the reason for this is that it really feels like once it commits to doing the task, it's really taking it very seriously. So this was a migration task. I've got a little app. I'm doing a bunch of visualizations. And what I wanted to do is to re-architect it and basically put it on a firmer footing. I always struggled to do this before. The models will kind of half do it and then stop. But here you can see how many lines of code they changed, and it really moved me on to the next step. So that was really impressive to see. And I had a couple of times when it was generating for over 8 hours. So, which is crazy. Before, I think the biggest I ever got was something like 4. So to get to 8, I would say is quite impressive. One other app I want to show you, which I'm quite pleased with, I must say, and it actually combines with a couple of things that OpenAI have released, is they have released the image model, which we have covered and we tested on Arena, And the cool thing, which I must say I didn't quite realize straight away, but something that demoed, is that if you generate an image, you can have a 360 view. And the way they achieve this is that if you generate a really long image, so very kind of, I think it's 2x1 is the dimensions that you need to get. And if the model understands what 360 images look like, then you can get this really cool view. And what I decided to do is, how about I generate a whole bunch of them, and then I can have this kind of whole walkthrough where I could have like street view-like feel for creating, for walking through this kind of place. And the place I chose was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is a place which is like a little bit semi-mythical almost, where we know something about, but not enough to really visualize properly. So I got, the way it worked, and let me maybe show you some examples and we'll come back to it, is that the way it worked is I got the model to, so I got Codex and GPT 5.5 to plan out the whole of this map. So if you look at this map here, you need to map out all of the different coordinates. So it's not, you can't just generate a bunch of images, you actually need to think about how they link to each other. So I got it to map out all the coordinates. And then there was a really complicated job. So, I mean, you can see I haven't checked how many images we got to, but from memory it was something around like 400 or 500. Actually, I think it even got higher than that in the end. I think we're up to 1,000 now. And you need to coordinate all of this. Right, this is a complicated task. No, I haven't obviously tried it with many other models, but I don't think if you go a couple generations of models, it's not obvious to me that the models would have been able to do this nicely. And what then it was doing is that it was generating the images like that in the chat using the native image generation capability within Codex. And then it was kind of going through this and navigating this. So for example, it's here, it's saying, oh, the good news is the S06. So it's all the coordinates, how it was coordinating is landing beautifully. So, you know, it's happy with its work, which is, I'm pleased for it. So then it was like looking at the map, looking at the generation, seeing how it looks on the mobile, and kind of putting it all together. And that is like, that's what it takes to put this together. So this is really, really complicated task. And while this is not completely finished, you can see it's like slightly buggy, and I wanted to feel it like a little bit more natural. This feels to me like this is really cool. Like I really like this. This is really, really complicated task. It has this kind of 360-degree generations. I mean, I love the way this came out. I wish I could actually walk through it. Maybe I'll get to it. But the reason why I'm demoing this now before I've got it ready is that it literally took me the whole of last night to generate a bunch of these images, and I'm still not done. So I went to bed, I set up the task, and you know how if you ever try to do these long-running tasks, you quite often would maybe queue up a bunch of messages saying, oh, you know, keep going, you got this. And I did again this by habit almost. And when I woke up, it was literally still working on that very first message that I sent. So it didn't use up any of those images messages that I queued up at all. So what this tells me is that it really got this idea that if I've got a plan, if I know what I'm doing, it is a long-running task that I need to carry on and do it. And then since then, also since this morning, and I'm recording this at the end of that day, is that now I'm still generating the images, I'm improving it, I'm coordinating it, and so on. So it's getting up to close to 24 hours of Codex and I building this out, which is pretty cool. Like, this is not something that I would have done before, just because it probably would have generated, 30 images and said, oh, here you go, what else do you want me to do? So to be able to do this, I think is a far more important step change than getting like few more points on this benchmark or that benchmark. What I also want to show you is some of the front end that is generated. Now, Frontend has been one of those things for OpenAI models that they've really struggled with. And there seems to be just something that it doesn't quite have the right defaults. So quite often it would generate things that are like really massive and they'll kind of break out the verticals and so on. So even on the Arena, it's a very front-end focused benchmark that we have when people generate sites and they compare to side by side, or they generate games or applications or something like that. And quite often OpenAI models just wouldn't do that well. And it always felt like a little bit unfair because they're better than this, but on the front end, it was quite fair. So I've got a few kind of slightly wacky generations here. So this one is Electric Age World's Fair 1907. So that's a website for World's Fair in 1907. So I'm trying to get it to do something a bit more creative, a bit of auto distribution. So you can definitely see some UI issues here, like, oh, why is this like in the corner here and so on, there are things coming out of the frame. Again, this kind of massive HK. So it's like not completely ideal, but I must say it used to be so much worse. So this is much better than what it used to be. Let's compare it to others, see what you think as well. I've got a few examples here, but I would say, at least to my taste, this is not too bad. Although I would say this kind of checkered background, it does seem to like. So maybe it has like this kind of nice go-to, but I do like it. Maybe it'll get boring at some point. So this one is DeepSeek model here that we've got, which is also quite exciting to compare to. And I would say this is like quite boring to me. This looks like it's a nice website. I must say this is actually quite nice, but it is like a little bit boring. And it's not working. But oh yeah, I do like that. Yeah, actually, yeah, the map. Did it do a map here? Oh no, it didn't do a map. Oh, okay, the map here is not very good. So yeah, I would say the map is nice. So I didn't even know how it did that. Then we've got GLM 5.1. I would say it's okay. Like, I don't love the colors, and it's like everything's like, I don't know, not quite my favorite here. The map is not quite as good. We've got Muse, so this is from Meta. I would say not like hugely inspiring, but not a bad website. But I don't know, it feels like a little bit heavy to me. But yeah, it's not too bad. And then we've got Opus 4.7 here thinking, which I think is the best generation out of all, where we've got this kind of really nice old font, the different elements here. That feels like much more, I don't know how you feel about this, but to me this feels like much more, oh yes, this is much closer to what I was thinking. And if we go back to the OpenAI model for a sec, generation, I would say it's okay. Like, it's not terrible. It's definitely not the best. Yeah, it's like it is there somewhere. Oh yeah, and we've got the Gemini here as well, which, I mean, it seems okay to me. Not maybe that impressive, but yeah, that's not too bad. Yeah, so somewhere middle of the pack, I would say. So the last one I'm going to show you is the Asteroid operation website. So this is like an asteroid mining company that has a website kind of from the 80s. So that's the idea. So meant to have this kind of 80s vibe. So like how well did it do? So we've got the checkered background again. This kind of thing you pick up. I think it's one of those things that looks pretty good when you start. Probably in a couple of months you'll be like, oh, this background again. So maybe in a couple of weeks. So not ideal. I would say it has tried to do certain elements which sort of maybe a little bit oldish, but it's not bad. Here we've got DeepSeek generation, looks quite nice to me. Maybe the font is a little bit more 80s. I wouldn't say like I love this website. It's a little bit hard to, I don't know, just like everything's a bit small, a bit sparse. I don't know, it feels like there's a better way to design it. Gemini 3.1 Pro, you see, this is interesting. I think if I was to say like who is the more creative generation, this is definitely it. Like, I would say this is probably like, if you're gonna say 8 years, you probably think something like that. So this is cool. I like that. Feels very tactile, feels very, like, you see what I mean? It doesn't feel like just like a normal website. Whereas this feels a bit closer to like a normal website. Muse Spark here, interesting. Like, doesn't feel 80s to me, but I do like it. That is nice. We've got the nice buttons here, nice visuals. Also feels like it put in effort to make it quite nice. And then GLM 5.1 here is, yeah, it's interesting. Almost like closer to DeepSeek in a sense. Like, I think it sort of tried things, but it's kind of not necessarily my favorite generation here. Yeah, between those two. Yeah, a little bit hard to say for sure, but yeah, there's something about it I don't particularly love. But yeah, it feels like for creativity, I would say Gemini should win here. Yeah, how did 5.5 do? I think it's okay. Like, it's not terrible. It's not like an awful website, but certainly is it the most creative? Is it like the most ambitious? Definitely not. So that's an interesting thing about this model, that it can really do long-running tasks. It's like completely incredible at it. By far the best model I've ever seen on that front. I would also say it is much nicer to talk to. It feels smarter, feels kind of, I don't know, more reassuring almost. So we'll see. I need to play with it more to get a stronger feel. So it does feel kind of better in some directions. But on things like just build me a website kind of thing, it's probably still not the best model. So that's my impression. See how you find it. But what I would say is, from trying this out here by myself, I'll be very happy to use it for these kind of very heavy tasks. Like, I had the migration task, I had this cool task of let's build this whole new thing that doesn't need like a lot of UI, but needs a lot of thinking and managing. These kinds of tasks are really amazing for it. But if you need to say do any front-end work or things like that, you're probably still better off with a bunch of other models that do a bit of a better job on it, which I must say is a little bit of a shame. I think it's interesting also to think about, what does that tell us, right? If it is a new pre-train, does it mean that all of the UI kind of smarts that maybe Opus has, that Gemini has, that all kind of comes in that kind of post-train stage, which is, I guess, maybe bad news for OpenAI in the sense that they kind of haven't solved that for, I don't know, feels like a year now. But maybe it's good news in the sense that maybe if they're like almost there, they're about to solve it, then maybe they could just do another round and make the model way better. But I guess we'll see in the next releases that they might have. So, as always, the most important thing that I encourage you to do is to test the models. Always use them yourself, and always make sure that you don't just look at the score, but try them out yourselves. So try it on the arena when it comes out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.